Matt Gaetz. He's the congressman from Florida. He's got a new book out, Firebrand: Dispatches from the Front Lines of the MAGA Revolution. Congressman Matt Gaetz, thanks for being with us here on the Howie Carr Show.
Thanks for having me. Good to be on with you.
So is Florida going to be ready for any of these Election Day shenanigans? I'm not thinking of your area so much as I'm thinking of my area, the South Florida, Broward, Miami-Dade, and Palm Beach counties. Is there going to be any more nonsense, or is 2 years of Governor DeSantis cleaned up that area?
Governor DeSantis has had a very positive effect on the integrity of the vote in Florida. He fired the supervisors of elections in Palm Beach and Broward County after their mismanagement and malfeasance, and replaced them with folks who will actually count the vote, which is all we could possibly hope for. You mentioned Miami-Dade County. That may be the national story of this election, with more and more Hispanics abandoning the Biden campaign, abandoning this neo-Marxism of the Black Lives Matter movement that the Biden-Harris campaign continues to embrace. We are seeing numbers in Miami-Dade County unlike those we've seen for any Republican in a great deal of time. And so I'm confident that in Florida we have the right elections officials and law enforcement officials in place. Just breaking moments ago, the Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody accepted and agreed with my call to begin an investigation into Michael Bloomberg and his associates' activities in Florida, literally buying the votes of ex-felons to try to swing the election in the favor of Joe Biden. Where I'm worried is Pennsylvania, Howie. You know, Pennsylvania, we don't have Republican elections officials. The court there is making all kind of weird decisions. And it appears as though they don't want a result on Election Day in Pennsylvania. They want to be counting votes for days and weeks after. That is deeply troubling to me, and it's one of the critical reasons why President Trump must fill this seat on the Supreme Court. We hope the Senate takes up that confirmation process with due haste, and that we have a full complement of the court to resolve these critical questions that I think at this point are probably inevitable. Yeah,
there are a lot of problems in Michigan, judges rewriting voting laws from the bench, same thing in Wisconsin. And Matt Gaetz, I'm glad you brought up Pennsylvania. I have this editorial from the Wall Street Journal, 3 days late and no postmark needed. That's the ruling on mail votes from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. State law clearly says absentee ballots must be received by 8 p.m. on Election Day, but Thursday, the court controlled by Democrats in a case filed by Democrats rewrote the law to change it. They changed the law. Even one of the Democrats on the Supreme Court wouldn't go along with this, Matt Gaetz. I mean, this is just total lawlessness.
You know, when we all used to vote at the city hall or the town center or the local church or the elementary school, we typically knew the results of these elections by 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. If it was really close, you might have to wait till the following morning. But with Democrats, in the name of expanding the franchise, diluting the integrity of the vote, now it appears as though it could be days, weeks before we have a winner. And Howie, you see what they intend to do with that time, with the Antifa thugs taken to the streets, with the denigration of our law enforcement. They really are trying to create a destabilizing event in our country. I mean, gosh, today on Capitol Hill, Nancy Pelosi and Jerry Nadler even talking about court packing and adding states to the United States to Senate pack. These folks accuse Donald Trump of damaging institutions of our democracy. They're doing more damage to our democracy than they ever could have accused Trump of.
Yeah, it's all projection. Everything they accuse Trump of, they have in the back of their own minds, on their own agendas. I'll just read you one more thing from this editorial from Pennsylvania. If their postmarks are missing or illegible, they will be, quote, presumed to have been mailed by Election Day, unquote, unless evidence shows otherwise. What could possibly go wrong, Congressman Gaetz?
Yeah, I mean, the Pennsylvania voting regime is just one step above message in a bottle. You know, I mean, it's like check yes or no with elementary school students at this point. No verification, no postmark, no relationship to time and the specific event that an election is supposed to be to render a verdict on leadership in our country. It is intended to create a process of of a lack of clarity, and the process then is the punishment. Voters should view these election shenanigans a lot like they viewed the Russia hoax, an effort to avoid debate, avoid a real discussion about the issues facing America, and instead an effort to simply demoralize, delegitimize, deplatform the leaders who are chosen by the voters through the Electoral College.
So are you from the same district that Joe Scarborough used to represent? You're from the same general area, aren't you?
Yeah, we don't like to admit that too often, but yes, back when Joe was a conservative, he represented the Florida Panhandle, and now those are the fine folks that I serve. Don't hold it against him that we sent Joe Scarborough to fight for us in Congress a few terms.
What happened to Joe Scarborough?
Money. I think Joe Scarborough was willing to be the most conservative member of Congress when Newt Gingrich was Speaker, and when NBC News was willing to pay him $10 million a year, he was pretty much willing to say or parrot whatever they wanted him to.
I think I read a quote from you last year saying you wanted to be the Republican AOC or words to that effect. And I always wondered about that.
Paint me in that corner. No, I think AOC's got a few assets I don't, but she certainly has a command of the media, and she understands that, to drive change in the country, you don't need to spend 10 years renaming post offices to become the subcommittee chairman of the Swamps and Bogs Committee. Instead, you need to rally people around the ideas that are consistent with your values. Now, unfortunately, her ideas would destroy America and turn it into, the types of governance systems that have failed around the world. My idea is that we actually put America and the American people first. It's why I wrote my book Firebrand, because I believe that the Trump values have to be able to endure beyond the Trump presidency. We need a generation of leaders who won't be eager to invade everywhere in the world and invite every illegal alien to cross our borders without any consequence. Instead, we need the type of trade deals that put our workers first. We need the type of productive economy that creates a blue-collar boom. And we need to ensure that the foreign policy that the United States engages in is for our benefit, not for the benefit of defense contractors or foreign interests.
If you were a betting man, would you bet that the Republicans can regain control of the House in this election?
For us to regain control of the House, we're going to need a few bounces to go our way. I know there are several seats the Democrats won in 2018 they had really no business winning, in South Carolina, in Oklahoma, and we should win those seats back. But, I'm less concerned about whether or not we win a slim majority, and more concerned about what we'll be fighting for if we have it. I mean, I was here in the majority when Paul Ryan was Speaker, and each day it seemed like we showed up finding new and creative ways to surrender to the left, even though we held the majority. So, whether it's this coming term or the next election, we will get a Republican majority back. I just want it to be a fighting majority, a majority that prioritizes immigration and trade as our value premise, and that we don't just, go to K Street and try to lobby for them.
But if there were a Republican majority now, you wouldn't have had all this nonsense with the Ukrainian impeachment hoax. And the fact
let me push back on that. Let me push back on that, Howie. I mean, it was the Republican majority that birthed this damn Russia hoax. People like Trey Gowdy, who once were deemed like iconoclastic on the right, were out there saying that the FBI did nothing wrong. I think history will judge Trey Gowdy very harshly because he defended the FBI when they were breaking the law to try to frame the president and the people around him. And when I said those things back during the Russia hoax, it was folks like Paul Ryan and Trey Gowdy saying I was wearing a tinfoil hat and that I had, gone off the deep end with those allegations, but they all turned out to be true. And I think that it is a lesson to Republicans about how the left fights and how we have to respond.
Yeah, I agree. Trey Gowdy turned out to be a bit of a disappointment, but he came up in that federal prosecutor system, and I don't think he wanted to admit to himself that the FBI was as corrupt as it was. Same with Andrew McCarthy. I mean, he's a pretty good commentator, former U.S. prosecutor from New York, and it took him a long time to come around too, Matt. I mean, if you're from I'm from Boston, so I mean, we saw the FBI corruption firsthand here for for 2 generations. We were more inclined to believe it. And Mueller was up here running it. But most people had no idea what was going on.
Well, we had Republicans in Congress giving Robert Mueller a cat bath upon his appointment. I was the first to say that Robert Mueller never should have been appointed, that he should have been removed from that position by Jeff Sessions. And by the way, it was nice to see the voters get the final verdict on Jeff Sessions' political career. But I don't give Gowdy or McCarthy or any of those so-called national security folks a lot of quarter, because they were criticizing us as Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows and Ron DeSantis and I were calling this coup what it was. You know, we already had to fight the Democrats. We already had to fight the media. But then the fact that we had to fight Paul Ryan and Trey Gowdy and some of the Republicans made the endeavor even more troubling for the president and the presidency, and I hope we never have to go through that again. If we elect more Republican firebrands, we won't have to.
Matt Gaetz, do you think that a lot of the Republicans, especially the ones who retired in 2018, and that's a large reason you lost the control of the House, do you think a lot of them really believed the nonsense of Russian collusion and the dossier and Christopher Steele and, you know, on Hillary Clinton's payroll? I think a lot of them actually believed it.
I think a lot of them were afraid. I think that in Washington, when the establishment starts to dictate terms on things, it's just very easy to go along with them. And that is true in both the Republican and the Democrat Party. I think it took courage for people like Andy Biggs and Doug Collins from Georgia and others to step out and say, no, this is nonsense. We should not give Mueller all of this deference to go and ruin people's lives and to cast a cloud over the presidency. We should tell him to put up or shut up. And that was what we were saying, and we turned out to be right. But the tactics that the left used during the impeachment process will be used again. They'll be used in this Supreme Court fight, and they'll be used after the president's reelected. And so I think my book is instructive on how we have to fight back. Like, we have to create the images and the moments. When Adam Schiff went down into that basement, we went down there to jailbreak the truth, and we took direct action as members of Congress to do it. I think that's the way to prevail and ensure that these America First principles truly do endure and unify the country.
They say you're known by your enemies. You have you have a nice collection of enemies, Matt Gaetz. People really hate you, and I think it speaks highly of your character. The title of your book is Firebrand, Dispatches from the Front Lines of the MAGA Revolution. Good luck, and I'm sure, give my best to Joe Scarborough the next time you see him, which will be never, right? He doesn't get back to Pensacola too often, does he?
No, I think I'm off the Christmas card list.
Thank you, Matt Gaetz. I'm Howie Carr.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.